we are saying when we say thank you is this, and it's so important. We are saying, I see you. That what you have done for me, what you have said to me, how you have treated me, has not gone unnoticed. You are saying, I see you. I see you. You have made an impact in my life. That's what gratitude is about. It is powerful to say that. Thank you. Sometimes there's stuff going on in our life, and our fear is to just be there now, right? Some things are going on, and we're thinking, no, I just want to get beyond this. I want to get done with this. I want to be somewhere else. And this song is really about, right? Just be here now. That's what you got. That's what we have. So thank you, Michael and Justin, for that. Well, last week I did a little lesson from this book called The Four Things That Matter Most by Dr. Ira Byock, and he is a palliative care doctor who works with end-of-life patients and their families. And last week I said, oh, you're probably going to think this is a book about, how many people were here last week? So yeah, maybe half the people were here, so half of you weren't. So I said, okay, so if that's the case, you probably think this is a book about death and dying. Yikes, who wants to hear about that, right? But really, fortunately for you and for me, this book has a byline that says it's a book about living. It's a book about living, so take a deep breath, all is well. It's a book about living. And really, what the premises of this book is, the bottom line to the teachings of the four things that matter most, is that healing and wholeness in every relationship in your life is possible. That healing and wholeness in every relationship in your life is possible. And I told you last week, now you're probably thinking about that, and you don't have to go very far, but your immediate family, by the way, to think about the person that you think, oh heck no, that is not going to be possible with this person. Right? Are you thinking of that person? They're not very far down the family tree, right? There's someone real close, maybe even the person you love the most. You're thinking, how could I possibly feel healing and wholeness in this relationship? This is the person that abused me. This is the person that disrespected me. This is the person who took advantage of me. This is the person who chose not to love me when I was looking for love the most. How could I possibly have healing and wholeness around this person, the person who criticized me and told me that I was no good? I didn't tell this story last week, but being Father's Day, I'll share what this is always a tender story about my father being with his father, my grandfather, on his deathbed. And my grandfather was an alcoholic. He was a very, just very sad person, very angry person in his life. And on his deathbed told my father that he was never any good and nor would he ever be good. And I always thought, wow, what a load to carry around with you from your father, right? How could you ever have healing and wholeness in that relationship? And what I'm saying is, in this book, the way it's presented by Dr. Ira Byock, that the four things that matter most allow you to be healed and whole from whatever relationship you feel is pulling at you. And the first thing that we have to do is to believe that it's actually possible. That I know that healing and wholeness is possible for me. Because we're not talking about healing the relationship so that we can get together and go out and have dinner, and hang out together. That's not healing and wholeness in a relationship. What it is I feel healed and whole in this relationship. So you have to believe that that's possible. I know that healing and wholeness is possible for me. So say that together. I know healing and wholeness is possible for me. That's the thing. And the other thing I said we need to be able to recognize is that healing and wholeness in a relationship does not come from cutting the other person off and leaving them over there. The whole cutting the person off it's still staying with you. We have to realize that we're all connected. In the unity teaching, and certainly the metaphysical way of thinking about life, is there's no separation between us. Even though we're in these bodies that look separate, in spirit, we are one. There's no separation. And there's no better example of that I shared last week than thinking about when there's a tragedy somewhere, maybe even halfway across the world. When we see that, we feel tender about it, don't we? We feel connected to it. We feel as though we want to, if we could, reach out and soothe that person who just lost someone in an airplane crash or a natural disaster. You know, we're connected. And the other example is to realize the impact of solitary confinement in prison. The impact of being separate from people in that way for periods of time. Every time I read that, you know, this person was in solitary confinement for 3 years. I mean, that would be like death itself. So we can't have healing and wholeness and, you know, being separate because we're all connected. All right? And that's what it's about. So the 4 things that matter most are, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you. Please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you. Forgiveness, appreciation, and love. That's what heals relationships. That's what heals me. That allows me to feel healing and wholeness in me by practicing those. And I mentioned last week, you know, this idea of forgiveness, we have contorted it. We have contorted it, and we make it be about making everything okay. Like it's okay. No, it's not about making okay. It's about making me whole and healthy. That's what it's about. It's about healing me. That's what forgiveness is about. And I told the story about this guy, Steve. I don't know if those of you who remember it from last week. He's the guy, he's from Montana. He's a real Marlboro man kind of man, right? And he's dying. He's dying. In fact, he has a hard time breathing. He's smoked all of his life. He has emphysema. And he's really anxious. He is in deep anxiety. So much so that he calls out to his family and calls his wife, "God, get over here." You know, he's really anxious. And Dr. Byock introduced him to these 4 things that matter most. And Steve said to him, "Well, can you write those? Those sound really good, Doc. Can you write them down for me?" And so the doctor wrote them on 3x5 cards and gave them to him. And it wasn't long before the Sunday dinner came around where his kids were going to be there and his wife too. And something happened there that Steve wanted to relay to Dr. Byock the next time he visited. And he said, Steve began this way. He said, "You know, when he was sitting there on Sunday mornings and he was relaying this to the doctor, he said, "You know, the doctors tell me that this emphysema is finally going to get me, and I know I haven't always been the best father or husband. Well, there are some things that I want to say." And with his eyes on that handwritten list, he said the 4 things in his own words. And although his anxiety didn't disappear just by that, it changed the whole family dynamic. He told them how much they meant to him, how much he loved them. And after that day, everyone reported that there was now a tenderness and a cohesiveness among them that no one could remember having ever felt before. That's what the practice of forgiveness can result in. Sincere, please forgive me, I forgive you. And how that happens, I said there's a strategy for how that happens. And it's simply this. It's recognizing that we're all human, that we all make mistakes, that every one of us is imperfect, and every one of us is carrying our own pain. That's the truth. Every one. And when we look through those eyes at other people, we're able to see beyond the surface. The strategy number 2, this is like strategy number 1, is simply this. I am human. I am imperfect. I make mistakes, and I carry my own pain. You see how that works? The strategy of being able to forgive is to recognize the imperfection in all of us. It's pretty simple. It's not always easy. And I shared the little story, and I hope this isn't too much of a repeat for those of you here last week, the story from Mark Nepo's book that said about that, and it says, Not owning our imperfections can end relationships. Not being able to admit that. Owning them can deepen relationships. Remember this? Humans have spilled soup for eternity. And generations have made excuses saying, it was the earth. The earth shifted. And generations have secretly thought he meant to do it. If you want to save the world, then when you spill the soup, simply say, I'm sorry I spilled the soup. It's really that simple. And when we begin to be able to forgive ourselves for those things, to admit that we make mistakes, to admit that we're not perfect, to admit that not everyone is going to think the way we think, to realize that we're human, and we forgive ourselves for that, then we can ask others, please forgive me. I know that I'm imperfect, that I don't get it right all the time, that I've stumbled. It's really that simple and not always easy. That's what forgiveness is about. And what that forgiveness does, it frees us. It frees us up from having to carry that around, simply by accepting our own human imperfections. That's it. So the next two lines start off with, well, thank you. Thank you. And I love you. Those are the two I want to talk a little bit about today. Here's a basic premise that I think we should start off with, the idea of thank you. And that is, the people closest to us, who we expect them to know how much we care about them and how much we appreciate them, those are the ones that know about it the least. They know the least that we appreciate them. The people that you live with, the people in your family that you think, well, they know I appreciate them, they're the ones who don't know that the most. It's the truth. Why don't we just accept that? Why don't we just say, that's the way it is. All the people that are closest to me, they don't really know how much I appreciate them. They're looking for appreciation the most. And then I would say to you, how many times do you say thank you? How often do we say thank you? How often do we let them know? Because really what I'm talking about is gratitude here. And I know in Unity, some of you Unity folks, oh, I'll carry around a gratitude or an attitude of gratitude. You know what? You should erase those two words from the same sentence. Gratitude is not about an attitude. It just sounds pithy and cool, but it's not true. You know, gratitude takes words and actions. You don't just walk around with an attitude of gratitude. You have to say it and you have to show it. You have to make it known. It doesn't work just an attitude. It's a practice. Gratitude is a practice. Saying thank you is a practice. It's not an attitude. Erase. That's not what it is. What we are saying when we say thank you is this, and it's so important. We are saying, I see you. That what you have done for me, what you have said to me, how you have treated me, has not gone unnoticed. You are saying, I see you. I see you. You have made an impact in my life. That's what gratitude is about. It is powerful to say that. Thank you. You have made an impact in my life. I was thinking about that with Renee. Last week you saw me cry, apologizing to her. I probably need to apologize again today because it's a practice. Forgiveness is a practice. But I'll start off with thank you. You know, this morning I got up at 5:30 because I was going up to Raleigh to speak at a church in Raleigh this morning. So I said, I gotta get up early, take my shower, look at my message again, get all ready for the presentation up there. And you know what Renee did? I got up at 5:30. She got up at like 5:40. And she went in the kitchen and she made my tea and she made my little water with lemon. You know, and she took care of me. She peeled a hard-boiled egg and got it ready for my lunch. She washed some fruit and put it in a cup so I'd have something to eat for breakfast on the way. You know, and thank you. Thank you for doing that. She could have slept in. God knows she deserved it to sleep in. But no. So thank you for doing that. It makes a difference. I see you for it. I recognize you for it. And it makes a difference to me. So thank you. It's good to be specific about things and thankful for specific things. You know, it's happened to us actually in the last couple of weeks. There are some people who gave us that thanks. Our neighbor John passed away on Tuesday. Was it this week or last week? Last week. And his brother came over, who was at his house, and he came over to Renee and I said, I just want to thank you for being there for John. And so we started sharing some of the ways we were there for John, and Renee said, yeah, like that one morning, he came over at 8:30 in the morning with a six-pack under his arm, said, let's have a beer together. And Renee said, well, John, it's only 8:30 in the morning. He says, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Really what he was looking for, he was hungry. And so Renee made him a few ham sandwiches. We actually had ham in the refrigerator. That's not usual. And sent him home. You know, that's the kind of ways we were there for John, and his brother was so thankful for that. Every time we send money to Homes of Hope India, I don't know how many of you support that, Paul Wilkes, local organization, they build orphanages in India. And Renee and I are big supporters of that work. And we know Paul Wilkes, he's the CEO, or he's the head guy, let's put it that way. And every time we send him money, he'll send us the form letter back that says, for tax purposes, thank you for this amount of money. And every time he writes a handwritten note on there. Every time. And he calls us you girls. You girls, you know, and he starts going on about that. Oh, he's so grateful. And how does that make us feel? We were noticed. Somebody saw us. Somebody recognized us. You know, the feeling that that had and the connection that that has is immense. A while back, Renee and I got together with Debbie and helped her out in a way that to help her. And we knew Debbie, and we knew what she was, the obstacle that was before her, and we helped her with that obstacle, right? And what did Debbie do? She sends us a homemade card. She didn't go out to the store and buy a card. She makes a card. She makes a card and puts all this love into that card, and she sends it to us and says, thank you. Thank you. What a meaningful thing that was, Debbie, for you to send that to us. Huge, huge. And what about this? Everybody has recognized this. You let somebody in and they do this in the window. Doesn't that make you feel good? Doesn't that make you feel recognized? Like, I see you. You didn't have to let me in, but you did. Well, not everybody does that. Maybe you don't do it all the time either. But hey, thanks. Thanks for letting me in. That's what it's about. You know, practicing gratitude in a meaningful way for specific things changes us. It changes us. And it's much more than just the act of gratitude. Let me read you this. By paying attention to the details of the ways in which people give to us and show us care and consideration, we become more mindful of our own lives. We begin to focus on our own good fortune rather than our problems. If we practice this consistently and diligently, feelings of gratitude can pervade our life. Gratitude is not an attitude, it's a way of being. It's a way of being. And practicing it allows these things to come to the surface. To recognize it, to be able to articulate those kinds of things, and to accept people's thanksgiving as well. So, be specific. I say, if you're going to thank someone, be specific. You can start off with thanks for everything. You know, that's nice. What do you mean by everything? To be healed and whole in any relationship, we've got to be specific. We've got to be specific. That's what brings out the healing and wholeness more in us than anything. Because sometimes it's not as apparent on the surface. Sometimes you got to go a little deeper. Sometimes you have to go a little deeper. Because, for instance, maybe your father isn't the one that you can immediately say was daddy's little girl, was daddy's little girl. Maybe there's some difficult relationships that you want to feel healed and whole in. And the surface piece is not there. You've got to look a little deeper. Well, let me tell you this story from the book. This is a story of a woman called Arlene. And her parents were divorced when she was 8. Her father was an alcoholic, and he moved away and divorced her mother. And her mother was single for 8 years, and Arlene assumed she would never get remarried because her mother was very shy. Well, at one point in time, this man named Conrad really had his eye on Hazel, right? It happened, and she, being a young girl, she was like really not sure about that. Conrad was married at the time, and after he divorced and married her mother, he used to tell a story about how he was smitten with her mother, even while he was married, and that just made her mad. You know, that just made her mad. She didn't trust him. She always thought he had underlying motives. Her whole life, she looked at Conrad in this way. And she thought that he had somehow manipulated her mother, and it turned into a grudge that she held against him. But it was soon clear to her that her mother had fallen head over heels in love with him. And she said, "Not me. I never fully trusted him." Well, fast forward, and not long after his 73rd birthday, he had an MRI that showed that he was well into late stages of cancer. And her mother was a mess. Her mother was a mess, didn't know what to do, and so Arlene was around a lot to be there for her mother. And one day her mother found Conrad on the floor. He was delirious. He went to the hospital, and soon after that the doctor said that Conrad was actively dying. That's what was happening to him at that stage. But this is what happened that was transformative for Arlene. During the last few days of his life, sometimes Conrad would be in a world of his own. He'd be muttering, and his arms would be up in the air as if he was trying to climb. And at one point, he was trying to get out of bed, and her mom was leaned over to him, talking to him, and he grabbed her shoulders with both hands. And Hazel said, "Conrad, it's me, Hazel. Sweetheart, you're here with me. You're fine, darling. It's all right." And he looked up in recognition and released his hold and smiled at her. And he reached up and put his arms around her neck and pulled her down close and gave her a long kiss. And he said, "I love you, Hazel. I love you too, darling," her mother replied. He said, "I've been so happy. How can I thank you for all these years? It has been so wonderful being married to you. What about if we do it again?" And she looked at him, and I could tell she was too moved to speak. And he said, "Will you be my lawfully wedded wife?" And he smiled, and she smiled, and she said, "Always." And then he kind of drifted away. Dr. Biox said, "Did your mother say anything about that at the time?" And she said, "Not at first. We just looked at each other, and Mom's eyes were wet with tears. And then I said to her, 'He is the great love of your life, isn't he?' And she said, 'Yes. He is my great love.'" And suddenly, when she said that, it was as if whatever lingering resentment or distrust I felt for him fell away. I felt this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. He had made my mother incredibly happy. And so the next time that Conrad was lucid, I sat with him and asked my mom to leave the room. And she was surprised, but pleased. And she looked at him. She said, "I thanked him for loving my mother." And I said, "You have made her so happy. Thank you." And he just smiled and reached out his hand and said, "I know, I know." In that moment, to find gratitude for something that she hadn't felt gratitude for her entire life, by seeing the love that he had given her mother. That's a pretty incredible thing, to be able to thank him for that simple thing, Finally, it's "I love you." It's probably the most important single sentence in human language, don't you think? I love you. When we say "I love you," we're saying, you matter above all else. You matter above all else. We don't say it enough, probably. Maybe. Am I projecting onto you? Saying "I love you" is really a way of declaring that that relationship is important to you and that it matters. And I want to tell you one more story. I know I'm running a little bit late here, but I think it's important to share the story about this young man named Mike. He grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household. His mother and father were very staunch, fundamental Christians, and they devoted their lives to their children and their church. Mike and his 3 sisters. And around the age of 35, Mike had lived away. He moved back at around the age of 35, and then one day he didn't show up for work. And his sister found him on his apartment floor, and he was weak and disoriented. He went to the hospital, and after giving a battery test, he was found to have AIDS in its advanced state. This was a while ago, before AIDS treatment was, when AIDS treatment was fairly primitive. But both Horace and Louise, his parents, had no idea that he was gay. They had no inkling, and the idea of homosexuality was repugnant to them. Now, I'll ask us all to suspend our judgment of Horace and Louise in this story, because it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary for us to judge them. But they were ashamed of their son's disease and what it symbolized. And they were caught in this soul-wrenching tension between the tenets of their faith and their love for their son. They could not make it right in their eyes. He could not make it right. And they could not make it right in the eyes of their church. But they could not deny their love. So when they were confronted at the hospital about who was going to take care of him, his mother said immediately, instantaneously, and unequivocally that they wanted to take care of Mike in their own home. There was no other way, no other option. She said, "We love Mike, we loved him dearly, and we still do, and we wanted to do everything we could for him and ourselves." So, while their feelings about homosexuality were no secret, no one at the hospital ever heard a word of rebuke from them or detected a shred of doubt in their decision to take care of him. When Dr. Byock asked his dad about an interaction they had, his father, Horace, kind of cocked his head to one side, shrugged, and said, "Well, I told him that I could not condone what he had done. I'll never understand it, but I said, 'I love you, son,' and that will never change, and really that's all there was." Kind of like that. And Dr. Byock said, "Well, what did Mike say?" And his father said, "Well, he just looked sad. He said, 'I love you too,' and that he was sorry to be causing us pain." And then his father broke down. He broke down. There was nothing neat or pretty about the situation that Mike and his family were in. His parents wanted him to recant his sexuality and make a public apology, and Mike's gay friends wanted to take care of him. You can feel that dynamic, right? In the midst of all of this, the Whitmans' love for their son shone like a beacon. Let me let you hear this. Mike had a slew of physical problems, including rectal herpes lesions that required frequent cleaning. The image is indelibly etched in my mind of his father gently bathing his son's sores 3 times a day, knowing full well what had caused them, and believing as he did that homosexuality was a sin. He did this without a whisper of scolding. Mike was his son, and it was his job to love him. In a quote from Rilke, "For one human being to love another human being, that is perhaps the most difficult task that has been entrusted to us, the ultimate test and proof, the work for which all other work is merely preparation." Please forgive me for all the times I've fallen short. Please forgive me for when I haven't been able to live up to your expectation. I'm sorry for the times that I've been short, that I've come across as uncaring. Please forgive me for those times when I haven't seen you. Renee and everyone in here. And I forgive you for all those things that I hold in my that you hold in your heart that you think you've given me. Rest assured, there's nothing I'm holding against you. Please know that anything you said to me that later on you felt like, man, maybe I shouldn't have said that, know that I'm not holding any of that. And I forgive you for any times that you felt that way. And I want to thank you for always showing up here and supporting me. Thank you for being here on Father's Day, on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Thank you for making the decision to be here and make a difference. I want you to know I see you. I see you. I see what you bring here, and I want you to know out of that I love you. That I love you for the expression of the divine that you are, for the unique nature that you bring to this earth, for the amazingness in your plethora of differences and your amazing beauty right now. You know, I love you more than your body, the way it looks, what you've done, what your accomplishments are. I love you because you are an expression of the divine, and I can't be separated from you. And I love you most, Renee, because of always being there for me. For being this unique expression that's decided, hey, I can put up with you. So please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. And I love you. So let's take that into meditation today. We take a deep breath. To know that healing and wholeness are possible for me in every relationship in my life. Through the practice of forgiveness, appreciation, and love, I can be released from the bonds that I have placed on my own heart. That I can find, even in the most difficult relationship, that to be thankful for, to be grateful for, and that I can feel the love for this one, this expression of God that came to earth with this pain, with this imperfection, with these mistakes, and decide to love no matter what. So breathing in and breathing out to make it so. awaken when thinking, I love you. And life begins when saying, I love you. And joy moves like blood when embracing someone